Okay, let's have a bit of a discussion on material design. I want to give you a bit of an overview of what material design is, and it's something that Google have been pushing onto us for some time now, certainly since they talked about Android Lollipop initially. So, why is this such an important part of Android Lollipop? Well, the concept of a material design is that it's an interactive and designed sort of set of principles or guidelines from Google, and it relates to how the applications that we create, how they look, and also how our users, people playing or downloading our apps, using them, how they interact with those apps. Now, this material, when you hear that term material, what is that? It's really the stuff, for want of a better term, that buttons, fields, and other things are really made out of, or I guess to be more accurate, they're constructed with. But more on that shortly. Why would we bother using material design? Well, it's very cool and makes your app look and become more engaging. And obviously, if you're using material design, your apps are going to be more blended in and be sort of more working better with Android Lollipop, for want of a better term. So let's check out a couple of really cool apps, and you'll be able to do this whether you're running Android Lollipop or not. If you're running Android Lollipop on your physical Android device, be sure to go check these out. But even if you're running this or running an earlier version of Android, KitKat or Jelly Bean or something like that, still take the time to go and check these apps out. Because one of the good things that come with Android Lollipop, well, not Android Lollipop specifically, but we've got the principle of downwards app compatibility. And what that will mean here is that we can have some of our older apps that are running on older devices, running older Android SDK versions, in other words, and they will still look much like the current Android Lollipop. So we can retain the colors, the styles, and so forth, because Google gives us the facility to do that. So it can be a good idea if you've got an older version of Android to check them out anyway, just to see what it looks like on an older version, because then you'll know that when you're creating apps for Android Lollipop, you'll get an idea that the fact that they'll still look pretty cool on older Android versions as well. So let's go and check out these two apps. The apps in question are the Google Play app from the App Store, the app that you download apps from if you're using Google Play, and also Gmail. So let's check those out now. Okay, so let's check this out. I'm going to just go through and show you Gmail first. And this is an example of a pretty cool app. So we can click on the drawer there. You can see the drawer opens from left to right and slides out, which is pretty cool. And we can just check email like we would normally check. That looks pretty standard, but all the buttons to the left-hand side. It's just a nice looking app. And that's really what we're trying to do here. This is like an Android compliant app. One of the first ones that's come out, actually. And it just looks nice. So there's not really a lot to show here, but it's just really just giving you a bit of an overview. I just like what they've actually done with it. So that's one. That's the Gmail. So let's just back out of that. Okay, so let's go into Google Play now. And this is the Play Store. And I like this design of this. I like the drawer that opens on the left-hand side when I open it like that. And I can go into My Apps and Wish Lists and People and Redeem and so forth, which I won't bother with now. But just the look of the app itself is pretty neat, I think. It looks great. Obviously, we can just click onto apps if we want to do that. Notice the theme at the top. There's some tabs there on the screen now. And this is just standard Android functionality that we're going to be working through as we go through the course. I just think it looks really neat. It's not overdone, but it's very much something that people are going to be getting used to as they're actually using your app. They'll be used to using other Android Lollipop apps that are of a similar sort of design, and your apps are going to fit in quite nicely. Now you can see there as an example how the toolbar with apps on it is slightly raised from the screen, so it's meant to look like it's sort of over the top of that screen, if you will. So I like the design. So there you go. That's just a quick overview, and definitely worthwhile if you are running Android Lollipop on your physical Android device, if indeed you have one, to try this out. But also, even if you aren't running Android Lollipop, to still check these apps out, because on the previous version of the Android KitKat or whatever you're running, these apps have still been updated. They just won't have all the material design in them, but they still will look very much the same. And that leads us into that app compatibility, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later in this video. Okay, so let's move on. Pretty cool apps, as you can see. Okay, let's continue. The next thing can be a good point of reference is for you to go to Google's website. Now you can Google material design spec sheet or even material design and you'll get to that page. And if you want to just type it in, it's www.google.com/design/spec/material-design. And this is Google's sort of manifesto, for want of a better term, on what it's all about. So let's go and check that out now. Okay, so I'm going to type in material design. That'll probably be enough, but if that doesn't get you to this link, just add spec sheet to the end of it. But you can see here, introduction material design. I've been there before. Click into that. And this is sort of the extended version. This is the notes. This is the design principles, the specifications, if you will, for material design. Now, you certainly don't need to know everything that's on this site, but it can be a really good way to introduce yourself to the concepts of material design, just at a sort of a high level. And you can always come back and go into more detail at a later time. Now, just an overview that this website doesn't talk about programming. It's more the the concepts of the layouts and how many density independent pixels, gaps between things, those sorts of things. So it's more a graphical user interface type of thing rather than a programming thing. But let's just go through and click a few things. So I can select the menu here. And a good place to start is layout. Click on principles. I talk about the principles there, but the thing that I want to show you is Google's interpretation. They refer to screens effectively as paper. And the elements you're drawing on top of you're drawing on top of a piece of paper. So the analogy is that paper is, of course, a screen in this case. So they give you overviews of toolbars and where menu options should be, where search buttons should be, settings, etc. And as you go down, they go into more and more detail. And they give you, the good thing about this is throughout the website, they give you some good do's and don'ts. And it'll really help you sort of solidify your understanding of what material design is if you take the time to go through this website. It's really like, you can get into all sorts of detail. Like even, for example, toolbars have a standard height of 56 density independent pixels on a mobile. Well, it's good to know that you've got somewhere definitively to tell you how wide how high, a particular toolbar should be. So it's a one-stop shop for you to find out what you need to do. But again, as we go through the course and we create apps, I'll be referring back to here as appropriate and be sort of reminding you of some of these rules and so forth. But again, a good website to give you some of the principles. And look, there's lots more details on this page. We can go into style, for example. They even give you, for example, color. So you're probably aware, if you've seen Android Lollipop, it's very vibrant and bright and the colors are sort of very out there. And they've done that for a reason. That's their entire design. And this page on their website goes into all sorts of details. Now, these codes here on the left-hand side, you're probably wondering, what are they? Because, like, for example, red, we're probably familiar with the hex code because we've used that before for colors. But what about these numbers down the left-hand side? And you'll notice that each sort of color theme has got those numbers. Well, the cool thing is, as you scroll down in this document, those numbers to the left are used to sort of tell you which part of the screen to update that color with. So for example, if I just go down here, now you can see here it tells you the toolbars and larger color blocks should use the primary 500 color. So again, the 500 color would be, in this case, primary indigo. That would be the hex code we'd use. But scrolling back here again, the status bar should be the darker 700 tint. And that's the one there. So again, you'd go back, in this case, you'd choose that code. So you can see what we're doing is, if once you choose your basic color, and you sort of say, for example, if we scroll back up, let's just say you wanted to make your app to be essentially the major theme to be red. You've got all these codes, and you'll know that for toolbars, the standard way of doing it is to use the 500. So in this case, your toolbar, if you're using red, should be that code. And the status bar at the top, you'd come up to here and you'd choose the 700. And these numbers are used elsewhere, throughout for backgrounds and so forth. So I think personally it's great that Google have done this, because they're giving us a set of criteria to design our apps to make sure that they are sort of compliant with Android Lollipop, but also so they, from a theme perspective, they fit in, and also so they look like other sort of Android apps in the sense that they fully support the platform, and it's a good sort of unifying experience from a user's perspective. So in other words, your app isn't going to look out of place. Because you can imagine, if you don't use these philosophies or these principles and you do things your way, your app is going to look, very funky and very out there, and not fit in, if you like, with the overall theme. So that's what this website's for. The design guidelines are there to help you with those color choices and so forth. And there's so much information on this website. So we talked about color. We can go back to style again. Now, even icons. They give you design guidelines about what icons and so forth. Typography. Great information on this website. So again, I don't want you to think that you need to memorize all of this, but it is a great place to start to just sort of get your head around a little bit of what some of the things are, what material design is in more detail, but also what Google is expecting you to use from a material design point of view for Android Lollipop apps. And just lastly, if you go into components, you can see they even go into things like cards. They talk about, sample cards. There's sort of standard layouts and so forth. So you can't really go wrong in the sense that Google have done a lot of the work and sort of given you the design principles and sort of the checklist to use to make your apps look really good in Android Lollipop. And I'll certainly be referring to this as we go through our process anyway. Okay, so let's just go back and just finish off this video now before we move on to the next one. So is it worth it? Well, heck yeah, in my opinion, it is very much something that you should be using. This is material design in your apps. Not just because it's for Android Lollipop, but one of the really cool things, which we'll be talking about in the next video actually, is app compatibility. Google spent an enormous amount of time trying to ensure that the functionality of the current version of their SDK, which of course is Android Lollipop, will also work in previous versions. So there's an entire sort of product which we'll be talking about firstly in the Flickr browser app actually, when we have the GUI interface. And that enables us to have a lot of the functionality in Android Lollipop in terms of this material design working in previous versions. Now it's not going to be identical because it is emulating that functionality, but a lot of it will transfer over. So if you spend a little bit of time, doing things in a slightly different way, you can have your app look fantastic in Android Lollipop, but still have that Android Lollipop type look and feel in previous versions of the Android SDK. Very, very powerful. So we'll be talking about that in the next video. So let's move on to that video now.